Prince Naseem has got to be one of the most unfairly criticised boxers in recent history. Anytime this man is mentioned, you will have comment sections flooded with people mentioning a single loss in his career, which somehow negates all the great things Nas did in his 37-fight-long career. A fighter with tremendous power, speed, balance, and a half-decent dancer, Nas had it all. A promoter's dream. And I'm sure if he fought in today's social media obsessed world, he'd become easily the biggest star in the sport, and probably rivaling the likes of Conor McGregor for mainstream appeal. So is the criticism justified? Well, let's find out and answer the question, how good was Naseem Hamed actually? On April 14th, 1992, Prince Naseem entered the world of professional boxing under the guidance of legendary trainer Brendan Ingle. His debut would come against British journeyman Ricky Beard. Despite being caught with some decent shots, Hamed showed off his unique style, throwing punches from unorthodox angles and got a knockdown in round 1 with a left-right combination, showcasing his solid hand speed and power. In round 2, Nas would land a solid body shot which crippled Beard, and the fight was over. Nas showed the British public a glimpse of what was to come, power, speed, and of course showmanship, which was on full display during this fight. His style was immediately engaging, leaping in with shots from all manner of different angles and going against the norm of what the majority of fighters would do. Nas remained extremely active as he rose through the ranks, winning his next 10 fights with 9 of them coming by knockout. Nas would demoralise his opponents, making them miss and making them pay, all while dancing away from their punches and showing solid power from someone his weight class. At 20 years of age, Nas would get his first major title fight, fighting for the European bantamweight title against Vincenzo Belcastro. Nas would go the full championship distance for the first time in his career. However, he was in full control throughout the fight, using his fantastic athleticism and speed to put Belcastro down in the first round. He'd score another knockdown in round 11 and would cruise to a unanimous decision to become the European champion. He'd make one defence of his title, stopping Italian champion Antonio Beccardi in round 3, before picking up a WBC Intercontinental belt against world title challenger Freddie Cruz. Cruz was a solid test, never being stopped in his previous 56 fights. Despite the toughness of Cruz, Nas would hurt him early, looking close to stopping him, swarming all over him with fast and accurate punches and showing fast reflexes to evade what was coming at him. After 6 rounds of punishment, the referee, preventing the inevitable, would stop the fight, which was a fairly impressive win. His next 5 fights wouldn't go further than the 4th round, and all of them ending by knockout, and adding to Nas's already very impressive highlight reel, and all while being free to air for the British public to watch, which gave Nas a massive profile in the UK. In 1995, very controversially as he'd never fought at the weight, Nas would move up to featherweight and get a world title shot against Welsh WBO champion Steve Robinson. Going into Robinson's backyard in Cardiff, Nas put on a very dominant display, making it a pretty one-sided affair. Despite the considerable size advantage Robinson had, he was unable to assert himself and was getting overwhelmed by the unorthodox style of Nas. In round 5, following a barrage of punches, Nas would put Robinson down, but wasn't able to get the finish until round 8, where Nas would land a left hand, which didn't seem to have much power on it, but it was clear the punch resistance was long gone from Robinson after all the punishment he received throughout the fight. At only 21 years of age, Naseem had already become a world champion. He'd go on to make light work of his next 2 defences, his first defence against Khalid Lawal, who was a very unknown Nigerian fighter who had previously only fought out of Austria. This was quite literally a blink or you miss it type moment. The entire production team weren't even ready for it, as the camera hadn't actually fully zoomed in yet, as Lawal was instantly put on the floor, and he wouldn't last long as Nas would put him away for good shortly after. Hamed did have a slight scare in his second defence against Daniel Alicia, where he was dropped for the first time in his pro career in the very first round of the fight. Alicia would settle into the fight much better and would catch Naseem with some big shots prior to the knockdown, with Nas unable to rely on his athleticism to evade the shots. Alicia would land a big shot which put down Nas, but it wasn't a heavy knockdown by any means, and Nas would spring straight back up. Nas would respond in the best way possible, as in round 2 he would show off his freakish power, landing a right hand which put Alicia down and he was badly hurt. Getting back up and then stumbling to the corner, the writing was on the wall. Nas would get the knockout shortly after, landing a right-left combination which sealed the deal. His next defence would be over in 2 rounds before he would get an actual test for his world title against former 2-time world featherweight champion Manuel Medina. This would easily be the toughest fight of Naseem's career so far. Naz would score a knockdown early in the fight in round 2, dropping Medina heavily, but unfortunately for Naz, the round was essentially over by the time of the knockdown. The experienced Mexican won his fair share of rounds and made the fight very competitive throughout, and presented a much tougher test than a lot of Naz's previous opponents. However, Naz would take the fight away from the judges' hands as he would put Medina down twice in round 9, but the extremely tough Mexican would somehow manage to survive only until the fight was called off in round 11, where Medina's corner retired him. After scoring another second round KO in his next fight, Naz would get a chance to add another world title to his collection, fighting against long-reigning IBF champion Tom Johnson. Despite being a very credible name, Naz would put on a masterclass of a performance. After hurting Johnson multiple times in the fight, he would end the fight in round 8 with one of my favourite KOs of his career, landing a lovely uppercut, which unfortunately for Johnson, he would duck down and move his head right into the shot and would be brutally knocked out. Naz would then defend his new IBF belt in emphatic fashion, knocking out European champion Billy Hardy in round 1 and followed up with 2 more knockout victories. For some reason it shows that Naz lost his IBF belt before facing Jose Badillo, which, if anyone can explain why he was no longer the IBF champion in the comments, that'd be great. I did look online, but I just get very vague answers saying it was due to boxing politics, so yeah. Anyway, after stopping Badillo in round 7, Naz would make his American debut in the iconic Madison Square Garden against former WBC champion Kevin Kelly. Now this fight is best described as the featherweight version of Hagler Hearns. In front of a packed out Madison Square Garden, both men would engage in a shootout with knockdowns galore. In round 1, Kelly would strike first, landing a counter right hook which hit Naz flush on the chin. Naz wasn't seriously hurt and got straight back up and managed to survive the round. But Naz would once again get himself into trouble in round 2. Naz was too static and Kelly capitalised, landing a big left hand which sent Naz all over the place. But Naz still managed to get up and he didn't look overly hurt, which is something you see throughout Naz's career. Despite how many times he gets put down, he never actually looks seriously hurt. Anyway, he would recover well and turn the momentum of the fight when he would score a knockdown right on the commentator's cue. Just as he was talking about how Naz is a big puncher, Naz would knock down Kelly with a right hand. Both men had their fair share of success in round 3, and in round 4, the fight would come to a dramatic end as Hamid would land 2 left hooks that sent Kelly down for the second time, but Kelly managed to survive and come back and get a third knockdown of Naz, which wasn't much of a knockdown. The 2 fighters traded, with Naz coming in with a left hand, but was countered with a right, which made Naz put his glove on the canvas, and per the rules, it was deemed a knockdown, which actually occurred earlier but wasn't seen by the referee. Kelly would try get the finish, but ultimately going blow for blow with a puncher like Naz will more often than not end in disaster, and in Kelly's case, he was countered with a short left hook, which finished him for good. Despite Naseem winning in such emphatic fashion, many were unable to get past the fact he was dropped 3 times in the fight, with many believing Naz was still all hype. Then Naz would face a veteran of the game and a 3-time champion, Wilfredo Vasquez. Naz would put the veteran down in round 3 with a left hand and also in round 6 with a straight left, before putting him down once again in round 7. Naz really did love knockdowns. After the knockdown, Naz would jump on him, landing rights and lefts, which had the Puerto Rican fighter badly hurt, and the referee jumped in to stop the fight. Naz would then beat former bantamweight champion Wayne McCullough comfortably on points over 12 rounds, which ended Naz's 18-fight KO streak. Most important to mention about this time in Naz's career is that he would split with longtime trainer and mentor Brendan Ingle. There was cracks in the relationship beginning to show prior to the Kevin Kelly fight. You can actually see an argument with Naz and Brendan in an excellent documentary Sky did about the Kevin Kelly fight, where Naz was annoyed about his preparation for the fight. I don't know the ins and outs of the relationship. Some say Naz wasn't as dedicated to the sport as he used to be, and the fame became overwhelming. But looking at the surface level information that I've got from it, it looks like both parties disagreed over money. If you know more about the relationship, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd be interested to know more about what happened there. And you could say once he left Brendan, that was the start of the downfall of Naseem's career. Naz would opt for another world-class trainer in his place for his next fight against Paul Ingle, turning to Emmanuel Stewart. Nas would beat the British and European champion Paul Ingle, and also... Now here is the fight every anti-Nas boxing fan loves to bring up and ignore his entire career, and that is of course the fight with Marco Antonio Barrera. Barrera was stepping up to featherweight following a long reign being the bantamweight champion, and he would make a mockery out of the many people who predicted Nas would finish him pretty early in the fight, and he'd put on a solid boxing display. He boxed well on the back foot, and he clearly had massive respect for the power of Nas. He never allowed himself to get into a firefight, and avoided any major shots coming from Nas. Nas did pick up some rounds, but overall he struggled to gain any real momentum throughout, and he was unable to adapt to Barrera's style. It was a fantastic display of counterpunching and a very disciplined performance from Barrera, who would deservedly win by unanimous decision and effectively end Naseem's career, as Nas would only have one fight after this, going all 12 rounds against Spanish fighter Manuel Calvo for the vacant IBO title. The fight would be a fairly disappointing unanimous decision victory for Nas, who showed he was still dealing with the demons of the Barrera loss. Clearly not the same fighter anymore, looking slow and out of shape, with even fans booing the fight and leaving early. A lackluster and pretty sad end to what was a otherwise box office career. So with that said, how good was Naseem Hamed actually? Was he more hype than reality? Well, in a career that saw him go 36 wins, with 31 of those coming by knockout, and only one sole defeat against a Hall of Fame fighter in Barrera, becoming world champion multiple times with plenty of defences, Nas was a fantastic featherweight world champion. A one-in-a-generation type fighter with a very unorthodox style and insane punching power for his weight class. He's a very unique fighter. He had tremendous speed and balance, and his overall athleticism caused so many of his opponents trouble. He had some solid wins against the likes of Vasquez, Kevin Kelly, Tom Johnson, Medina, etc. Also to mention, Nas was very durable. I see quite a few people surprisingly saying his chin wasn't great, but just because he was knocked down multiple times in his career doesn't mean he's chinny. He was never knocked out once in his 37 fights. Nas won't go down as the very best featherweight. I feel he'd need some more elite wins for me to say that, but certainly a great featherweight champion, and there's arguments to be had that he could have done a lot more, with many stories of past trainers such as Brendan Ingle and Emmanuel Stewart commenting on Nas, saying he was not living the life outside of the ring and he wasn't training seriously. However, with all that said, Nas will leave a legacy as one of the most entertaining fighters the sport has ever seen. He did a lot for the sport in terms of getting casual fans on board, and that deserves a lot of credit. From the highlight reel knockouts to the grand entrances, Nas understood that it's not only important to be a good fighter, but also an entertainer. And whether you love him or hate him, there's no denying the sport needs people like Nas. So let me know what you make of Nas's career in the comments, and let me know what fighter's career you'd like me to look at next.